And there we go. Good evening, Luddites and Jungle Gyms. Liking the fact that you're all here. Hello, Jerry. Hello, Jared. Hello, Emily. Jenny. Happiest of whatever to you too. Hello, Carl. Hello, Barban. Melissa. Hello, Nancy. Good to see you too. Greg. Hello, Greg. Ashley. Yay. And Stuart. Oh yeah, it's special conjunction. And Barban. Hi, Barb. Um, and yes, the special conjunction. I'm doing fine. As you've noticed, I am completely and utterly unshaven. I had a major consideration about everything. Went through the ethical and the ecumenical concerns, and did risk assessment and all my due diligence, and basically decided the hell with it. Who cares? Anyway, hello, Thomas from Wyoming. Hello, hello. Hope things are good out there. Probably a bit cold this time. And Jeremy, hello, and Jolly, hello. Anyway, lovely to have you all with me. It is Sunday evening, my time, here in actually sunny California. Was sunny today. Not that I got outside very much, but it was nice what I saw of it. And I hope wherever you are, that the misery is mitigated somewhat by something that's available to you today. We are counting down to the end of the year, the end of the holiday season, thank God, and everything else that goes with all of that. So I am just, as I mentioned before, hanging in. Yesterday was Deborah's birthday, the lovely and talented Deborah Beale. It was her birthday yesterday, and that's what we spent most of the day doing, was I wanted to say supporting that. I'm getting fuzzy, folks. What I really meant to say was celebrating that, and we did, and it was good. And now we are in the final shoot, going almost straight downhill into Christmas. And much still left to be done, even though we're going to be having a very limited indoor family, immediate family only kind of Christmas this year. But we've still got stuff to do. Among other things, we still don't have our tree yet, which is highly typical in our family, but I am determined to repair that tomorrow. So, what else to mention? I don't know, just all the usual stuff. As I keep saying, we don't really. I was actually saying this to a friend today who has just gone through a monumental move back to the UK. She's originally from there, and is going through all kinds of jet lag and stress and quarantine and all that kind of stuff. And so she was saying, "Oh, I hope I'm not just complaining to you guys all the time, and not hearing anything from what you guys are doing." And we were kind of saying, well, the truth is we're not doing much. I mean, we're doing things like, ordering gifts and stuff like that, but we are in the same mode as a lot of people, and we're kind of used to it. And as I've said several times, we are not personally suffering, although obviously we have to be careful because one of our kids is very susceptible, and others are somewhat susceptible to real problems from COVID-19. So we are very careful and very locked down in general. And but other than that, we're just here. And I'm working, Deb's working, when we can. And that's really all there is to it. We don't have a lot to say because we're not doing a lot. I am still working on that Christmas story. It has taken me longer than I thought it was, because I realized what I was actually doing was kind of more writing a novel in terms of its structure and pacing. And of course, I don't want to write another novel right now. I've got 3 others waiting for my attention. So I had to kind of keep working on cutting it down and making it simpler. And as a result, I'm going to have a real hard time getting it to read to you guys before Christmas. But I will have something fairly soon. So it has probably topped out at about 65, 70 pages in manuscript, which is like 20,000 words. So it's not short, but it's about as long as the last Bobby Dollar Christmas story. Anyway, so I'm still working on that. I can tell you the name, or at least the putative name for it, which is Two Partridges, One Pear Tree, a Bobby Dollar story. And I'm as I said, I'm still fighting away with it, but it's there's a lot to do at the moment, and I'm doing what I can. Anyway, anything else that I wanted to check in with you guys about? No, just we're hanging in. We're hanging in, and we're doing all right. And we have not given in. And if there's any time when I would give up and just lie down and die, it would be during the holidays. There's a weird thing that happens. Many of you are my age, or at least closer to that than to childhood. So you all know that there's a weird thing that happens when you grow up and Christmas becomes less important, or whatever seasonal holidays there are, because it's true with Halloween as well and all kinds of other things. But as you get older, the holidays become less important, and then you hit a point in your young adulthood where basically everybody in the family may actually get together, but it's not a big deal. Then the younger people in the family or the next generation start having kids, and it gets wacky again because, of course, kids put all the energy back into the holidays, and especially Christmas, where they are just absolutely freaked out and full of everything and have to be accommodated in many, many ways, and then still get so excited that I remember some friends of the family once Christmas many years ago, and the two kids came out and saw the Christmas tree and the presents and all that, and both of them immediately threw up. So that's it's an important a moment for young people to have Christmas, or as I said, any of these kinds of holidays. And then you go through that stretch, which we did 15 years ago, kind of started to come out of that again. And then all of everybody starts to get kind of back to normal again, or back to that, like, oh, ho hum Christmas, got to get presents for people and got to do this and got to do that. And so that's kind of where we're at as a family, although my children still eagerly expect all the good stuff. So we're kind of in that mode of like, well, I'm in that mode. All right, I'll be honest about it. I'm in that mode of like, the holidays. It's kind of a death march from October till January, as far as I'm concerned. So I the sentiments and the meanings of the holidays do not escape me, but I'm at a point in life once again where the things that have to be done outweigh the things that are to be enjoyed, unless you really force yourself to think about it and focus in. So that's where I'm at right now, and I am on my way through yet another holiday season, and the end is in sight, so I could be a lot worse off than I am. So I'm not complaining, really. But I'm never at my most cheerful during this time of the year. I will admit it. It's somebody like me who's always feeling like there's thousands of things undone that I have to take care of. This is not a good time of the year for people like me. Anyway, what we are going to do is we're going to read more of War of the Flowers. War of the Flowers. Those of you who could not be with me last night and haven't had a chance to listen, our hero Theo and our heroine Applecore, his tiny sprite friend, were basically stuck on a train and were about to be arrested by fairy police and hollow men, or a hollow man, who's a kind of unpleasant troll, and were saved by the intervention of one Poppy Thornapple, a young and very well-to-do woman who kind of for a lark stepped in and saved them because she'd met them earlier, Theo and Applecore, that is. But then they realized that they were going to be swarmed by cops when they got into the city, which is all it's called, just the city. And as a result, they convinced Poppy to get off with them a stop or so ahead of the city and hire a coach and take them into the city. So they would not be arriving right in the middle of the fairy police, etc. And as they did, there's a little bit of tension because Poppy Thornapple is the daughter of Lord Thornapple, who is one of the people who Applecore does not trust at all because of their politics. And although she seems very uninterested in politics, meaning Poppy, the daughter. But Theo doesn't quite get all of this, and so he's a little bemused by all of these details and political things. But he's begun to understand that his life is in danger and that he'd better pay a little more attention to Applecore and what she has to say. So that's where we are. So they have just arrived in the city, or they're just in the process of arriving in the city in the previous chapter. But now we're going to skip to another set of characters. So this is chapter 17, The Hothouse. The remover of inconvenient obstacles admired the way in which he had been kept waiting. Even in the midst of world-changing events, Nidris, Lord Hellebore, had taken the opportunity for a small assertion of power and status. An hour, sitting in a deceptively uncomfortable chair in his lordship's outer office, with only Hellebore's pale and silent secretary for company, had made the point handily. "His lordship will see you now," she announced, with her back still toward him. A door opened in the wall, silent as a petal falling to the ground. Reddish light spilled onto the carpet. The remover stood and made his deliberate way into the office of the master of Hellebore House. Lord Hellebore sat half in shadow, a ghostly presence. The remover recognized his own habit when receiving his rather infrequent visitors. That part of the remover's face which could still smile twitched a little as he sat down. The white flower in its spotlit vase glowed like phosphorus between them. "Dramatic lighting, my lord." Hellebore flicked his fingers and the light grew more even. "You will forgive me? I was thinking. A worthy occupation for a nobleman. And worthier for being unfashionable, eh? So, do you bring me news?" "Nothing you do not already know, my lord." "Yes. Well." A long time passed in silence. "Explain to me," Hellebore said at last, "why you have failed." The remover's tone was mild. "I have not failed, my lord. I simply have not succeeded yet. Remember, you wished me to begin this while the person in question was still in the other world. When he escaped the initial attempt and crossed over, he gained days. But the pursuer has crossed over now, too. I think your quarry's hours of freedom are numbered." The remover allowed himself another little smile-like tightening of the mouth. "I gather you have made an attempt of your own, my lord. I am surprised that after you spent so much to purchase my services, you are willing to spend still more on what I must honestly suggest are less likely methods. Really, my lord, hollow men. The cave trolls are not such bunglers as you make out. And what is the purpose of being rich, if you cannot employ multiple weapons against that which stands in your way? I would rather be paying a second assassin to stab the corpse than have an enemy slip away. But the task here is more delicate than a murder, my lord. That is why you hired me in the first place. Do you know the expression about cooks and broth? Would you choose to have several chirurgeons wrestling each other for pride of place while you lay ill on an operating table? Or would you rather have only one, the best man at the craft, standing over you?" Hellebore made a quiet noise of irritation. "When you have brought me this mortal, then you can gloat. If you succeed, I will make you official tame monstrosity to the Parliament of Blooms." After an almost invisible flinch, the remover said quietly, "But I am not tame, my lord. Enough of this. Hellebore stood, unfolding gracefully from behind the desk like an exquisitely crafted machine. I have another with whom I would consult. I think you know who I mean. I would like you to come too. You have not actually met him, have you, my lord? Have you? Just the once, my lord. Ah, of course. I had forgotten. Hellebore waved his hand, and a door opened in the side of the office. You don't object to meeting him again, then? On the contrary, my lord, I will find it most interesting. They had been walking for only a few minutes, but already the temperature was notably warmer. He likes his rooms heated, said Hellebore. That won't cause any problems for your condition, will it? Only minor inconvenience. Lady Hellebore calls this part of the tower the hothouse. And how is your wife? Hellebore gave him a strange look. The remover of inconvenient obstacles was not generally known for making polite small talk. She is well. She spends little time in the city these days, though. She has taken the younger children out to Festival Hill, our place in Birch. She is afraid there will be a war. But of course there will be a war. You are seeing to that. And that is why I have not talked her out of staying at Festival Hill. They reached another waiting room. Seated at the desk in this one was not a secretary, but a man in a white cloak, with a single band of white silk knotted about his dark hair. He looked up at their approach, then rose. Ah, Lord Hellebore. His eyes slid to Hellebore's guest, stopped for a moment, then rapidly returned to his patron. Have you come to see him? Yes, but I'd like to hear any news first. He is well, quite healthy. His appetite is uneven, but that is common in a child his age. Some days, nothing. Other days, we are calling down to the comb over and over. He looked worriedly for a moment at the remover, clearly hesitating. Go on, said Hellebore. He had another seizure a few weeks ago, but otherwise has responded well to the medicaments. Interestingly, though, he is a bit allergic to both moly and the most quotidian sleep charms. Yes, said Hellebore. Thank you, Dr. Iris. Well, Weft Iris, but how could you be expected to remember, my lord? You have so many important things on your mind. Open the door, please. Of course. Dr. Weft Iris sprang back to the desk and waved his hand above it, murmured something. A door appeared in the wall where there had been no sign of it before. Lord Hellebore stepped toward it, then paused and gestured for his guest to go in first. As he did, he heard the doctor quietly ask Hellebore, Is that? Yes, it is. Then the door closed, and Hellebore and the remover were alone in a short, steam-dampened hallway. You are a celebrity of sorts, Hellebore said with a cold smile. To the medical craft, and to a few other crafts as well. When the door to the larger chamber opened, it was at first very hard to see anything through the swirl of warm fog. When the air currents caused by the door had abated a little, the huddle of white-clad bodies on the far side of the white room became clearer. The two nurses stepped to the side as Hellebore approached. So quickly it almost seemed they must be guilty of something, clutching the towels they had been employing to the bosoms of their uniforms, their faces heavy with the look of foreboding common to the staff of that household. But their master apparently was in no mood to find a reason to punish anyone today. He simply waved them off, and, gratefully, they went. Hello, stepfather, said the small figure in the thick white bathrobe. The boy's voice had a strange throatiness, as though it came from a full-grown woman imitating a child's way of speaking. The skin visible on his bare feet, hands, and slightly round face was quite pink, perhaps with the heat of the bath he had just left. His curly light brown hair fell in loose, wet ringlets just above his eyes. "You can come forward. I'm really quite clean." "So I see," said Hellebore, but did not move. "I came to talk to you. I've brought someone. This is—" "I know who it is," the boy said with a grin. Even the remover of inconvenient obstacles, no stranger to disturbing sights, could not help noticing that the child's smile went his stepfather's grimaces one better. It did not touch his eyes or warm the rest of his face in any way. A grin like someone pulling up the corners of a corpse's mouth. "We're old friends, he and I." "Ah, yes. In any case, I wanted to ask you a few questions. Get your advice about something." "About Theo Vilmos." It was surprising in itself to see Hellebore surprised. "Yes." "He's still free." "How did you know?" "Oh, come, stepfather. That doesn't require any great art. What else would bring the two of you here? Your esteemed guest scarcely ever leaves his house in the waterfront district. And if you had managed to get your hands on this Vilmos, this mortal," he gave the word an unusual, even poisonous emphasis, "then why would you be asking me for advice?" The boy stretched, then beckoned to one of the nurses. She came, shamefacedly sneaking glances at Lord Hellebore to see if he objected. The boy shrugged off his robe and stood, rosily and plumply naked. "Dry me. I wish to be dressed now." As the nurse began to rub him with a towel, Lord Hellebore sent one of the other nurses for chairs. He sat, stretching out his long legs. "Well then, tell me why we have not succeeded." "Because this is not a runaway servant or a spy from one of the other houses you seek. Success will not come so easily." "Are you suggesting that somehow this creature is outwitting us?" Where another child might have rolled his eyes or snorted, the boy only became more still. Even as his outside was being briskly rubbed, he seemed to retreat into some quiet place within himself, barely within shouting distance. "No," he said at last. "I am saying that things like this, things of which this Vilmos person is a part, are never simple. He is an attractant of sorts, especially now that he is in our world, and so he will draw unexpected forces, cause unforeseen accidents, spawn unlikely coincidences. Look at the things that have happened around him already. Consider the momentous events of which he has unwittingly been part. Is a fish powerful? But throw one into a quiet pool where cranes and crocodiles are sleeping, and things begin to change." The boy turned his exotic brown-eyed stare on the remover of inconvenient obstacles. "You should know that." "I do, but you put it nicely." "Thank you. My stepfather has sacrificed much so that I might have a good education." The remover nodded. "Let's hope he has not sacrificed too much." Silence fell. Hellebore did not break it, but rose and gestured. The other nurse came forward, her arms full of soft, pale clothing, and the two servants began to dress the boy. "Come," the lord said to the remover. "I have kept the car waiting for you." "Give my love to stepmother," said the boy, smiling again. Hellebore grunted as if he were too distracted to reply. He did not look back and did not speak again until he and his guest were out of the steamy room and moving down the corridor, the air cooling with every step. "Everything that was ever written about creating a terrible child is true," said Hellebore thoughtfully. "He is an abomination." The remover nodded. "Then you got what you wanted, my lord, didn't you?" Chapter 18, Sidewalks of New Erewhon. You have to tell her, Theo. You know you have to. He didn't want to do anything of the sort. He much preferred looking out the window at the nighttime streets. It was a place strange beyond all imagining, this city of muted bronze and jade and shiny black glass, even here on its outskirts, with most of the sky-clawing towers still miles away. Johnny Battistini had gone to Japan once as a replacement drummer for a metal band past its prime. They made me wear a wig, Theo, no shit. I look like Phyllis Diller. A one-shot gig that he had talked about for years afterward. At the time, Theo had been frustrated by Johnny's inability to describe Tokyo and why it had made such an impression on him. Although he spoke about it frequently, summoning up the memory without warning from a haze of post-practice weed smoke, he could never explain his fascination more clearly than, it was just weird. It's like a regular city, but then it's all different and shit. But to them, it's not different. And that's the really weird part. I finally get where you were coming from, John boy. Theo felt a sharp, sharp pang of homesickness, as though a less substantial version of the knife that had killed Tansy's nephew had sliced him open and left him helpless against the strangeness of this new place. For the first time in his life, he truly missed Johnny B. The drummer would have reduced the whole of the experience to, wow, this place is crazy, and by doing so, made it palatable. Other than the bizarre variety of creatures going about their lives, just as though they were normal people in Theo's normal world, it was hard to say what about the city was so alien. The buildings, although a bit strange in shape and decoration compared to those back home, were still within the bounds of comprehension, no matter how gossamer thin the walkways between buildings or shimmeringly translucent the stone facades. General engineering seemed at least similar to the mortal world. Sprites and other fairies might fly, but the buildings largely resisted such notions. The nature of the city's artificial lights was different, of course, but he had seen that from a distance. He was just seeing it more closely now. The limousine had come out of a long stretch of darkened industrial warehouses on the outer rim of the city, and was rolling through a lively network of streets lined with stores and theaters and clubs and restaurants, many decorated with stylized moons and apples, apparently for the harvest holiday. All with signs ablaze, but these arrangements of glowing tubes and bulbs had a spectral twilight quality, as though even the fiercest, hottest spotlights were draped with shrouds of pale green and silver and gray. They weren't, of course. It was the light itself that was unusual, the otherworldly radiance of fairy, a spectral glow beneath which mortals first lost their way and then lost their souls. Theo! Applecore's whisper was so loud it hardly qualified as a whisper anymore. It felt like she'd stuck her head all the way into the hole of his ear. You have to tell her! Why can't she just let us off somewhere near where this foxglove guy lives? She shushed him with surprising force. It felt like she'd stuck a bicycle pump in his eustachian tube. Jesus, she sure has a loud voice for a tiny person, he thought, wincing. A friggin' 6-inch tall drill sergeant. We're not going anywhere near that shower, she hissed. I told you, I don't trust Foxglove, and don't mention any names anyway. Theo shot a glance toward Poppy, who was sitting with her head tilted back against the seat, listening to the music with her eyes closed and a little smile on her face. She was holding Theo's hand quite tightly. Okay, but why can't she drop us off near wherever it is we really are going? Because the more she knows, the more dangerous it is for us. And for her, if some reason you're suicidal in my life doesn't mean much to you. We don't want her able to tell anyone anything, except she dropped us in the Deep Shade District. He started to raise an argument, but he knew Applecore was right. So when do we get out? Now. We can get a bus anywhere around here. A bus? My God, trains are weird enough. There are buses in Fairyland too? Shut it, you! Do you want to give yourself away completely? Now tell her. And don't go looking for me to fix it or to make you look like a nice fella. She lifted off his shoulder and flew over to sit on the door handle at the far side of the car, fitting her curve back into the curve of the padded handle with her wings on either side. Go on, she said loudly. Poppy opened her eyes. Sorry, she said. This is just so much nicer than that old train. Father's factory will have a fit, of course. He's one of those old-school hobbities who acts like every penny you spend is a hair plucked out of his own backside. She giggled. My Theo, you must think I'm a foul-mouthed creature. Poppy, Theo hated being a bad guy. He tried to think of a half-truth, but could not ignore the fierce attention of Applecore watching him from the door handle with her arms folded across her chest. Poppy, we can't go all the way into the middle of the city with you. You have to let us out here. What do you mean? She looked from him to Applecore. The sprite shrugged. Where are you going? We have lots of places to go. You're in danger now just for knowing us, for helping us. We don't want to make it any worse. But I thought... Her expression hardened. You used me. No, Poppy, I swear, you don't really care about me at all. You just acted that way so you could get a ride into the city. I should have let the constables take you away. In the dim light of the back seat, she seemed to have gone chalky white, except for her staring eyes and the dark line of her mouth, which quivered. You probably are murderers. No, that would at least mean you were really desperate. You're probably just thieves, just petty, nasty little thieves. She pounded on the partition that separated them from the driver. Stop the coach! Pardon, mistress? Asked the Dooney's disembodied voice. Stop the coach! These people are getting out. The car pulled smoothly out of the slow traffic and over to the curb. The door swung open without a sound, Applecore still clinging to the handle. Outside, a sign advertising some kind of gambling parlor splashed shuddering blue-gray light all over the pavement. Look, Poppy, we're very grateful. I'm very grateful, Theo began. And I really do like you. You think I'm stupid. You think I'm a stupid child. Get out. Go to the well for all I care. Applecore, ever the pragmatist, was already out and hovering above the sidewalk. A trio of husky young ogres slowed down to peer inside the limousine. Hello, seedling, one of them said to Poppy, bending his immense form almost double to get his huge head into the open car door. He had fists like Virginia hams, and he smelled like something sluiced out of a factory in big pipes. Looking for fun? Come down from the pollen palaces for a little bit of the gray stuff? If you touch my coach, Poppy snarled at him, if you even breathe on the windows, I won't bother to have you killed. I'll have your family killed instead. Every one of them. The young ogre blinked at her. Then you can explain to the neighbors that Mumsy and Daddy and your brothers and sisters are all dead because you were thinking with your knob when you should have been minding your own business. Now, consider the whole thing carefully before you decide, gray stuff. Do you really want to fuck around with Thornapple House? The ogre had time only for one more dumbfounded blink. Then his two companions grabbed him by the arms and pulled him away, with a force that would have easily yanked a normal-sized person into pieces. Wow, said Theo as he watched them hurry away. You're tough. Get out of my coach! He turned. There were tears in her eyes, which made him feel like one of the lowest life forms imaginable. But there was also something in her face that made him shut his mouth again without the protest of regret and innocence that was halfway up his throat and rising. Instead, he turned and scrambled out onto the sidewalk. The door scraped his ankle as it slammed closed. A second later, the limousine pulled back into traffic, which parted for it, as though it were a dynamite wagon. "You certainly can pick 'em," Applecore observed. "Shut up." He didn't really want to alienate the sprite as well, his only friend, but he was too full of boiling misery to keep his mouth shut. It didn't matter, though. He couldn't think of anything else to say. He followed Applecore down the sidewalk in a daze, trying to sort out his feelings, all but oblivious now to even the strangest surroundings and most unusual life forms. Glad only that the night skies were clear, so he didn't have to add wading through puddles in a driving rain to his list of miseries. The thing was, he felt bad because he hated being misunderstood, but there was more to it than that. He had genuinely liked Poppy Thornapple. In the midst of all that had happened, it had been lovely to have a few hours of nearly innocent flirtation, the cheerful companionship of an attractive woman who also liked him. And there had been something about her, a what-the-hell quality that he had found fascinating. What did I do wrong? Applecore, who was doing her best to find the right sort of bus stop, ignored him until he asked again. "What do you mean, wrong?" she said. "I didn't lie to her. I didn't promise her anything." Applecore shook her head. "We don't really have time to talk about this now, Vilmos, and you probably don't want to hear what I have to say anyway." "But I don't get it. I was really careful." The sprite dropped onto his shoulder, grabbed his earlobe, and leaned out in front of his face. "By the trees, fella! Have you ever actually had a girlfriend?" "What the hell does that mean?" "Lots." "Then you must have worked really hard not to learn anything about women. Is that why you had so many? Easier just to dump them when they started making sense?" She snorted and sat down on his shoulder. Theo groaned. "My life sucked already, and now I'm getting lectured about my relationships by a fairy the size of a dog's chew toy. Perfect." She didn't say anything for a long moment, didn't even move. When she spoke, even with her head so close to his ear, he could barely hear her over the noise of the traffic. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize." "What?" "You heard me." "What did I say?" I'm sorry." He was turning his head so sharply, trying to make eye contact, that he had to stop in the middle of the sidewalk. A two-way procession out of an illustrated children's book eddied around him. "Applecore, please don't leave me. I said something stupid. Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't even know what it is." "Theo," she said after a pause, "almost everything you say is stupid." "Probably," he said, relieved. Her voice had sounded almost normal again. "And you shouldn't pass up an opportunity to kick me when I'm down anyway. You might not get another one for at least 10 minutes. But I really don't know what I said. Do you think my size makes me stupid?" "No." "And do you think I'm a woman?" "Of course I do." He swallowed down the "I guess," reasoning that it might muddy the situation. "And the problem you're sniveling about? Would that be a problem with a woman?" "Yeah, but..." "So why would I not be qualified to give you the benefit of my experience, being as I'm a member of that particular sex?" "Geez, that wasn't what I meant. It just..." "Shit. Forget it. I'm wrong, and so what else is new? Quit whinging. Start walking, you thick. And listen a little bit." Okay. "What did you do wrong? Isn't that what you asked? You said, 'But I didn't promise her anything,' as if how someone feels about you was some kind of court case or a contract, like you can solve it just by taking out the agreement and waving it around. See, I never said it. But how people feel isn't like that, Theo, especially women. And the thing is, you know it too." He groaned again. I don't know anything. Oh, yes, you do. I used to have a gentleman friend just like you, sweet-tempered most of the time. He could be lovely, he could. But he just took everything that was given him and never wondered what was expected back. So, what the hell is expected back? Will you tell me that? Or are we men just supposed to read your minds? By the trees, she said. It's like talking to a satyr in the springtime. Look, fella, so you didn't tell her you loved her, or that you're going to live with her in a cottage by the sea. Did you hold her hand? Did you listen while she talked about how happy she was? Did you, or did you not tell her she was lovely and that you were glad you met her? I thought you were sleeping. You were listening. Fair play to you. This is my life too, remember. Can you blame me for being curious about what stupid things you might tell the daughter of one of the people who are trying to kill us? He was walking again, but all but oblivious to the grotesque and beautiful faces watching him through the windows of restaurants and bars, to the shouts and foreign musical tones of the coach horns, even to the snatches of intriguingly exotic melody wafting out of the stores. Okay, he said at last. You were listening. What was I supposed to say? She was nice. You're just like that other fella I went with, Theo. What do you lads expect? You make us work for every word out of you. Half the time, if we let you have what you want, we never hear from you again. Or if we do, you're gone all strange on us. We have to try to read you like a book in some language we don't know. And then when we make a mistake, you tell us, "Ha! I never said that. You can't prove it." Look, you can't hold a girl's hand, cuddle up with her, tell her she's beautiful, then pretend that because you didn't ask her for her hand in marriage, it's all a mystery why she's upset when you piss off at the first opportunity. Theo shook his head. But you didn't even like her. You wanted me to stay away from her. I like her better for not sitting around listening to your excuses. But you're right, I didn't want us mixed up with her at all. Which, you may have noticed, is why you didn't see me playing finger tickle with her or rubbing me leg on hers when I thought my companion was asleep. Turn right here. What? Turn right here. There's a stop down this street for the bus through to the Morning Sky District. The stop, an ornate bench beneath a small but equally ornate leaf-shaped roof, stood in front of a boarded-up storefront. The sign over the store's front entrance had been pulled down, but in the silvery streetlights, Theo could still see the bolts that had held the letters in place, spelling Lily Pad Sundries in that strange, gibberish but he could read it way that fairyland writing usually appeared to him. There was only one other person waiting at the stop, a goblin sitting with a very straight back at the end of the bench. He did not look over when Theo sat down, but there was a change in the quality of his attention to the street that suggested he was not entirely oblivious. Okay, you win, Theo told Applecore. You're the Zen master of relationships, and I'm the uncarved block. Teach me. She laughed sourly, as if I need to add to my list of impossible jobs. Just use your brains, fella. I think you got some. Is that a compliment? Of a sort. She frowned. If this is the right bus, we can stop at my place first before we go on to... She stopped and shot a quick look over to the goblin, who was still solemnly watching the traffic slide past, his long nose pointed at the street like a finger. To the other place. Theo couldn't even remember where they were going. To see Foxglove? No, Applecore had vetoed that. We're not going to go wherever it is tonight, are we? I don't know, she said. It's getting a bit late, but I don't know where else you can stay. You said we were going to stop at your place. I'm not picky. I'd be happy to sleep on the floor or something. She cocked her head, looking puzzled. But before she could answer, the bus came around the corner, the engines humming with a sound like drowsy wasps, the brakes screeching a little as it pulled up to the stop. It was shaped a bit like a caterpillar, with accordion folds and a humped back, but still recognizably a bus. I'm getting used to things here already, Theo thought as he went up the steps, then stopped when he got to the top. It wasn't the driver who gave him pause, a squat, donkey-eared woman half Theo's size on a special booster seat, with modified pedals in reach of her dangling feet. Damn, I don't have any money, he whispered to Applecore. Doesn't cost anything, she said, but that's a good thought. We need to get our hands on a bit of the yellow stuff pretty soon. I pretty much emptied my tally bank. The little goblin had got on ahead of them and had already made his way back to the rear of the bus. Since all the seats at the front were full, Theo followed with Applecore on his shoulder. The passengers hardly looked up as he went past. They wound up in a seat in the second-to-last row beside a sleeping fairy woman with a faint lavender tint to her skin who seemed a bit the worse for drink or something. She had an odd smell to her, almost like camphor. Her cheek was mottled with an old bruise, and her wings were bedraggled, one of them even tattered along the edge. The goblin had taken a seat behind them in the last row, and was still staring ahead as though afraid to do anything else. The bus had gone a few blocks when Theo realized he had been drifting, thinking of the look on Poppy Thornapple's face as she threw him out of the car, and wondering why it hurt so much to remember it. About money? He said. Why don't we just have He paused. Theo was learning the trick. Theo was learning the trick of discretion, too. Why don't we just ask your boss to wire us some? You can do that here, can't you? She frowned. Not as simple as you'd think, but for reasons I don't want to talk about now. And I still have to puzzle out where we can put you up for tonight. But, he hesitated. Listen, I don't want to cause trouble. I mean, if there's some religious reason or something that an unmarried sprite can't bring home a member of the opposite sex 100 times her size? He suddenly thought of something. Wait, is this your parents' place? Is that why you don't want to bring me home? But I thought they lived back in... She stood up and touched his lips, silencing him before he could say more. No, you great idiot. It's just that when I'm staying here in the city, I live in a comb. He didn't get it. And so, what? Do you have a hairbrush you keep as a weekend place? If you don't want me in your house, just say so. Applecore rolled her eyes. A comb? That's a place where people like me live. You don't think I rent something the size of what you'd live in, do you? What a waste. It's a special place just for sprites and us other wee folk, you thick. Oh, is that comb like a honeycomb? You got the prize, boyo. And I take it that it's not big enough for me to sleep on the floor. Theo, if you took the roof off, you could just about wedge your head into the parlor, but you wouldn't have space left to wink. As for my room, well, I've got the biggest in our part of the place, and you couldn't probably spread your fingers on the floor without touching the walls. Our? Me roommates? We're all in and out, but there's near a dozen of us all together. That's just in our bit. The whole comb's got thousands. She looked out at the street. We're almost there. The thought of thousands of winged fairies in one place was faintly disturbing, like termite hatching season. Okay, I see why that wouldn't work. So what am I going to do? I sure don't have any money myself. Can I sleep in the park, or will the constables, or whatever they're called, come roust me out? More likely he'd get eaten by werewolves. She didn't look like she was kidding. Truly, you don't want to be in the park at night if you can help it? This is our stop. As the bus shuddered to a halt, and a few of the other passengers, gnomes, and spriggans, and various boggles squeezed their astonishingly disparate, and in some cases quite awkward shapes out of the seats and into the aisle, a furred hand suddenly appeared beside Theo's head, holding something small and vaguely white. He turned to see the goblin who had shared the bus stop with them, leaning forward. Please forgive my too sharp ears. The goblin smiled, showing sharp little teeth, and cleared his throat. I had no intention to destroy your privacy, but I could not help hearing something of your dilemma. If you should find yourself without a roof in the very large and not excessively friendly city, come to this place. My friends and I share it. Not much. It is not much, but it is safe. He nodded emphatically. Safe. Time to go, Applecore said, hovering noisily by Theo's ear. Thank you. Theo took the paper and stared at it for a moment, then closed his fingers around it. That's very kind. We all wait on the hilltop? Sorry, we all wait on the hilltop. The goblin nodded his head again, just once this time. It almost looked like a benediction. And we all wait for the wind to change. Still trying to make sense of the last two remarks, Theo followed Applecore down the stairs and onto the sidewalk. What was that about? Who knows? Some kind of cult. Goblins go for all that shower. Theo stared at the slip of paper. The goblin had written on it in a surprisingly neat hand, "Beneath the old Fayfort Bridge." He showed it to Applecore. Not your high rent cult, then? Was all she said. He was about to crumple it and throw it away when he remembered where and what he was. In a strange city, in an unfamiliar land, penniless and homeless. Can't afford to throw anything away, he thought. I might need to leave a note for someone and not have any paper. A suicide note, maybe. He folded it instead and put it into the inner pocket of his shirt. Here we are, she said as they turned another corner. Orchard Flower Combe. His first impression was not what he had earlier thought it might be, a termite nest, but of a vertical meadow full of fireflies. The air in the small side street was absolutely ablaze with flickering, swooping lights, gray-green, pink, yellow, and pale blue like a blizzard of radioactive snow. Some of the glowing shapes stood on the banks of tiny balconies that stretched the excuse me. Some of the glowing shapes stood on the banks of tiny balconies that stretched the length of the street, but most of the gleaming spots were actually flying in or out of the hundreds of doors. What are all those lights? Sprites? Applecore said. A few pixies and kinky punks and hoblanterns too, but all the flying ones are sprites. Why, what did you think? But you don't glow in the dark. Can't be bothered. Come along, you. She tugged at his ear, then flew on ahead. Theo took a breath and followed. Bright shapes shot past him with every step, and although many of them were indeed tiny little people, as human-looking as Applecore, the phenomenon felt more like walking through tracer fire. For every self-illuminated winged figure, at least a half-dozen that were unlit whizzed past him in the evening darkness, making themselves known only by the wind of their passing. An occasional wing brush through his hair, or, in a few cases, a small voice shouting something that he could not make out. In fact, now that the rumble of traffic from the streets was behind him, he could hear high-pitched chatter all around, laughing, shouting, gossiping from balcony to balcony, as the residents hung clothes or just enjoyed the evening. The firefly colony metaphor was beginning to fail. With its rush of wings and the background of barely audible voices, the alley that contained Orchard Flower Combe was beginning to seem more like a cavern inhabited by talking bats. The housing complex extended all the way along a wall that Theo only realized after some moments was the back of another full-size building. The combe started at about the level of his knees and extended several yards up above his head, something between a high-rise tenement and a dovecote. Row after row of box-shaped buildings joined side to side, so that it looked almost like someone had mounted an immense set of wooden post office boxes on the wall and cut little birdhouse doors in each one. Most of the dwellings had balconies added onto them, although some of these seemed little more than fruit baskets fastened just below the doorway. Theo's first impression of something as swarming and impersonal as an insect nest did not last long. The residents had clearly worked hard to put their individual stamp on their homes. Many of the fruit basket terraces had potted flowers, hanging tinsel, or streamers of cloth and other decorations, and most of the tiny houses had windows cut into the front walls as well, with curtains or blinds which colored the light that shone inside, so that the pastel flickerings generated by many of the residents were matched by the more static colors of the windows. Some of the dwellings had been modified even farther, perhaps by a single family which had bought anywhere from 2 to half dozen of the boxy apartments and then connected them in a number of clever ways, with exterior stairways and sliding poles. A few, to the secret delight of Theo's inner child, were scaffolded by a complex arrangement of chutes and ladders. Not all the ladders led from one dwelling to another. Long accordions of steps hung down to the ground from most of the buildings and looked as though they might be meant to be pulled up in an emergency. "What are those long ladders for?" Theo asked. "Pixies don't fly," Applecore said. "Now, you wait here. I'll be back in just a wee while." She rose a yard or so above his head and then flew into a lighted door he could just barely see. A few small shapes poked their heads over adjacent balconies to look at him, but didn't appear overwhelmingly interested. The sprite didn't hurry back out. As he loitered in front of Orchard Flower Combe, Theo found himself wondering for the first time what it was like to be Applecore, how he would feel if he had grown up in a world of giants who were proportionately as tall as ancient redwoods. He couldn't quite wrap his head around it. "Somebody from my world who knows something, a college professor or somebody, ought to come here and study this place. No, researchers, a whole bunch of them. Because you could live here for years, I'll bet, and only just start to get a handle on how different it is." "Ooh, he is a big one," someone said above him. For a moment, the pseudo-Hibernian dialect made him think it was Applecore poking fun at him, but the voice wasn't quite right. "Well, of course he is," said someone else. "She told us he was a big one." "I meant he's a big one for a big one," protested the first. "He's got shoulders." "Will the two of you quit it, you silly starlings?" said a third unfamiliar voice. "I'm getting me headache back." Theo squinted upward. On a balcony just above his head, a trio of Applecore-sized figures stared down at him. All three were young women, as far as he could tell, 2 with dark hair, one cut short, the other long, and the last with an immense fluffy mane of gold, half rolled in curlers. All 3 had wings poking out the back of their house dresses. "Are you Theo?" asked the blonde. "You're a big one, aren't you?" "Can you think of nothing else to say, Jenny?" snapped the one with short dark hair. "You're doing my head in." She looked down. "Pay no attention to this lot. They've only been in from the country about 2 hours." "Oh, Pet, it's terrible you are," said the other brunette. "She's been here about a month longer than us, and she puts on such airs." He tried to let his brain catch up. Are you some of Applecore's roommates?" "Yes," said the long-haired brunette. "Although for as much as Cora comes around these days, you'd think we were sharing the place with a will-o'-the-wisp." She made a little mock curtsy. "I'm Fuzz. The one with the sour face is my sister, Pit." "Fuzz. Pit," Theo nodded, still struggling. "We're peaches. And that one with her hair all sticking out like Peg Powler is Jenny." "Don't tell him that. It's just a nickname," the blonde said, and sniffed at her roommate. "It's really Aubergine. I'm an actress, and that's my stage name." "Yeah, back home in Hawthorne, she was just another eggplant," said Pitt. "Oh," said Jenny, "you're so stroppy tonight." "Well, me head hurts, doesn't it?" Theo cautiously raised his hand. So far, he had not been endearing himself to the female population of Fairy, and at the moment he was outnumbered 3 to 1. He had a feeling that the size differential wouldn't make any more difference than it had with the power balance between Applecore and himself. "Hello. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm Theo. Is she almost ready? She didn't tell me how long she'd be." "She's faster to get ready than most." Fuzz leaned over the balcony, squinting, her hair dangling. It looked to be almost as long as she was tall. So are you really a daisy? You don't look much like a daisy. What would you know? Demanded Pitt. When have you ever seen a daisy? I saw one on the news talking about some parliamentary thing. Don't be such a gull. Saw one on the news. Pitt shook her head. Just ignore them both. They only came out to ogle you. What? Said Fuzz. Are you saying it wasn't your idea? What a liar you are. He'll think we're terrible, Ginny wailed. See what I mean, said Pitt with grim satisfaction. Farm girls, fresh out the branches, still have pollen in their ears. Take that back, Fuzz demanded. Fortunately, just as Theo was seriously contemplating making a run for it, Applecore appeared beside them with a small suitcase in her hand. She lifted off the balcony and began to descend toward Theo, then flew back up and hugged her roommates. Where are you going? Asked Ginny. We've hardly even seen you. Not certain, said Applecore. I'll let you know. We just have some business to take care of, some daisy business, and it's better we don't advertise ourselves. Does this have something to do with those fellas who were asking about you? Fuzz wanted to know. What? Applecore was clearly startled. What fellas, then? You mean you didn't tell her when she first came in, said Pitt. What's wrong with you two? You were in the next room just watching the mirror stream. You could have come in and told... Shut up, the lot of you, shouted Applecore, and the heat of her response was so unexpected that her three roommates all fell silent. Tell me what you're talking about? Now? A couple of pixies we haven't seen before came to the door, Pitt explained briskly. They said they were friends of yours from back in Great Rowan, but they seemed nervous. Shite and onions. Applecore shook her head. I don't know any pixies from back there. What did you tell them? That you were gone and we didn't know when you'd be back. What do you think? Pitt scowled. I didn't like the look of them at all. Just as well I came home. These two probably would have had them in for tea and cakes and let them go through your room. That's not fair, said Ginny, almost crying now. And if you chased them away so well, then why did I see them just this morning, sitting out on the front sidewalk watching the comb? Pitt glared at her. You what? Oh, Ginny, why didn't you say anything? Demanded Fuzz. Because before I had a chance to remember, Cora came back. You had time to eat an entire sesame cookie by yourself before she got here. Enough! Applecore quickly gave her roommates another hug. Don't fight, you three. And if these fellas come back, don't let them in. In fact, call the superintendent and tell him the pixies are harassing you. Talk about it on the terrace. Get some other folk paying attention to them. Chances are they'll get tired of watching for me, but for all your sakes, I want you to make it uncomfortable for them to hang about here. Her wings hummed as she rose off the balcony. But where are you going? Asked Fuzz. This doesn't sound good at all. It's not, so it's better you don't know. Don't worry, dear ones, I'll be fine. I got my big friend, my big strong friend, Theo, after all. She settled on his shoulders, leaned into his ear. Let's get going. The trees alone know who's watching us right now. And I think at that point I better stop because there's still many pages left in this chapter. And as you can tell, I'm starting to lose my voice from doing high-pitched and hysterical pseudo-Irish, if that's even close enough to be called pseudo-Irish sprite voices. Anyway, it is now 8:04 my time here in California land, and I think that's where I'm going to stop. So just want to say to all of you, thank you. Those of you who celebrate Christmas, have a very Merry Christmas. It will happen before we get together again. As far as I know, I'm going to read again on Sunday, even though it will be after Christmas at that point. But I will read next Sunday again, same times as usual. And with that, I just want to say, if you do the holiday, have a good holiday. Be good to those around you. Be good to yourselves. And if you don't do the holiday, be good to those around you and be good to yourselves as well. That's what's important. And yeah, I think that's about it. So again, many thanks for joining me, giving me something to do, and convincing me even if erroneously, that there is hope for me and that there are still a few people out there who care what I have to say, or at least are willing to pretend to do that as an act of kindness. So anyway, there we go. Good night. Be good. I will see you next Sunday. If you celebrate Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas or Frohe Weihnachten or Feliz Navidad or Joyeux Noël. I don't know the others off the top of my head. But whatever the case may be, even if you don't celebrate, enjoy the solstice, which starts tomorrow, and the turning of the year, and the return of the light, because it's always good when the light comes back. Okay. Good night, everybody. Be good. See you soon. Bye-bye.